So today we are starting with just some multiple choice questions. Again, just part of our SAC revision, going through multiple choice questions that are relevant for chapters 11, 13 and 14. All of the multiple choice questions we're going through today are taken from past VCA exams. So kind of just looking at VCA 2012 upwards all the way up to VCA 2019, which was last year's exam. Just picking the multiple choice relevant to the mental health sections from there. I know some of you do have checkpoints, but not all of you do have them. So, and I guess some of you who do have the checkpoints maybe don't use it. So that's why I think it is important for us to revise through these multiple choice questions. Alrighty, so let's just get started. And this is the first question. I'm not going to click anywhere and show the answer. So after she was bitten by a dog, Trin developed a phobia of dogs, and you've got two questions related to that scenario there. When it says according to a behavioral model in the second question here, behavioral model just means according to the behavioral theories. Okay, so what theories are related to that phobia of dogs. So hold on, I'm just going to put the timer on. So we are working in time conditions. This is not really long, so I'll probably give you guys like 1.5 minutes. So your time starts now. So the question was, after she was bitten by a dog, Trin developed a phobia of dogs. So now whenever Trin sees a dog, and you've got to choose your options here. So obviously, it's important for us to do this question. You need to know the definitions of certain words, like, for example, inhibited. You need to know what that word means. You need to know what the word activated means, okay? You need to know what is the role of the parasympathetic nervous system. All of these terms you need to know in order to choose the best answer. So obviously the best answer for 22 is going to be A, C, D. It should be B. In fact, why am I just wasting time? I'll just project this answer on top. Yeah, it should be B, because obviously when Trin sees a dog, she's not going to experience a positive psychological response to stress. That's eustress. She's not going to experience that. Her adrenaline and noradrenaline are not going to be inhibited or stopped. In fact, they are going to be in a high level there. They're going to be activated. And her parasympathetic nervous system is not activated. It's her sympathetic that would be activated in any case. So the best answer is B. For question 23, according to a behavioral model, it is likely that Trin's phobia of dogs has its origin in. So in terms of origin, that's important for you. That's a key word in the question that you need to understand. So the word origin means, where does it originate from? Where is it originally or initially established from? Where is it originally coming from? And remember yesterday when we were going through some of these, things about precipitation or development of phobias, we said that a phobia is always developed through classical conditioning theory, okay, through the classical conditioning processes. So in this case, the development or the origin of the phobia should be classical conditioning. So let's read the options. Has its origin in classical conditioning and is maintained by operant conditioning? That looks correct to me. Latent learning is not in our study design, so we automatically eliminate that option. Again, option C is not that. Option D, we never learn about observational learning with reference to specific phobia in terms of developmental maintenance. So the best one here would be option A, if I can just, option A. Okay, so that is the correct answer, because classical conditioning leads to the origination or leads to the development of phobias, and phobias are then maintained through operant conditioning and principles of like avoidance behavior and negative reinforcement. So hopefully you guys got both of those answers correct. Let's move on to the next question. All right, so let me again put about, this one's a little bit longer, so I'll probably put about 2 minutes on the clock for this one. And your time starts now. Okay, so these were two questions, again, kind of related to specific phobias. So question 27 was, a psychologist treated a patient who suffered phobia of flying. During the therapy, the psychologist helped the patient to identify his unhelpful thoughts about flying and to identify other helpful and more rational thoughts about flying. Now, remember, when we talk about identifying negative thoughts or identifying unhelpful thoughts, it's about addressing the cognitive side of things. So the best answer should be A for that one. If I can get that answer up, yep, A. Okay, and we don't learn about biofeedback and flooding. Again, this is an old study design exam, so some of the terms in some of the options will not be relevant to us anymore, but overall the question is still relevant. Okay, so the answer is A, because it's about identifying and changing and transforming unhelpful thoughts to be more helpful and constructive and productive. Question 33. Anxiety disorders we know can be managed with benzodiazepines. Benzodiazepines work because they imitate the activity of GABA. Now, benzodiazepines work by, so this is basically, they've given you the information and they want you to explain, what do we mean by saying that benzodiazepines imitate the activity of the neurotransmitter? So they're trying to make you unpack this definition even further, okay? And you've got to choose the correct option there. So again, in this question, it's very important for you to understand, what does the word inhibiting mean? What do we mean by a postsynaptic neuron? What do we mean by increasing or reducing arousal? Okay, obviously, as long as you know what the word inhibiting means, this question shouldn't be too difficult here. So obviously, the best answer for this question will be C, because C says that GABA inhibits. We know GABA is an inhibitory neurotransmitter, so it obviously will inhibit the postsynaptic neurons. And inhibitory neurotransmitters, essentially what they do is, because they stop neural activity, they help to calm the body down. They help to reduce that overexcitement or overactivity or excessive neural firing that is quite common for people who have specific phobia. Remember, we talked about the fact that people with specific phobia, their brains are always in overdrive, thinking about the phobic stimulus, thinking about the next time they might encounter that phobic stimulus. So the best answer here would be C. Okay, again, important that you read through this question properly, not rushing through it, but actually reading each option and seeing, okay, because all the options here look almost the same. It's just one or two words that differentiate each of the options here. So sometimes it's best to just go through them and eliminate the ones that are incorrect, and eventually you'll end up with the one that is correct, okay? So that's essentially the answer is C there. So hopefully you guys got these two correct as well. So now moving on to the next one. This is again connected to a case study, and again from VCAR 2012. So the case study is, Charlie has just started secondary school. In history, he was required to give a talk in front of the class. Charlie was very anxious about speaking in front of the class. He stayed home on the day that he had to give his talk. So there's some avoidance behavior there, and he felt relieved as a result of staying at home. So I'm going to put 2 minutes on the clock now. So try your best for these two questions that are related to the case study we've just read, and your time starts now. Yeah, this was just a case study about Charlie. So question 39 says, the next time that Charlie is required to give a talk in front of the class, it is most likely that he will. So what is his future behavior? So obviously he did engage in avoidance behavior by staying home on the first day he had to give the talk. So what is the likelihood of the future behavior occurring now? What kind of future behavior might we see? So the best answer here will be C, because obviously he's going to stay home again because his behavior was negatively reinforced. Remember, we talked about this idea that whenever a patient with a specific phobia or something that resembles a specific phobia shows an avoidance behavior, so him staying home on the day he had to give his talk is a perfect example of an avoidance behavior that allows him to feel some kind of relief, some kind of comfort, some kind of feeling like, phew, I was able to dodge the talk today. So essentially what that's going to do is that it's going to promote a negative reinforcement there. Negative reinforcement because he took away this uncomfortable, unpleasant stimulus of having to go to school and give the talk. And for that reason, in the future, he's more likely to engage in the same behavior again or staying home again because his behavior has been negatively reinforced. So that's the best option there. So your answer should be C. Okay.
Why can't it be D?
It can't be D because his behavior is not maintained by classical conditioning. Phobic behaviors are maintained by operant conditioning.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so then question 41 is, the psychologist treated Charlie's fear of public speaking by first getting him to give speeches in front of the mirror at home. When Charlie was comfortable, the psychologist told him to give speeches to his family, then speeches to a group of his friends. Finally, when Charlie felt comfortable, the psychologist had him speak at the school assembly. So you can see here from this scenario that you've got like a step-by-step stages happening here. And at each level, Charlie is he's going one level up in terms of his exposure to the phobic stimulus. And eventually, Charlie's being exposed to the actual phobic stimulus itself of speaking in front of a large group, which is the school assembly. So that step-by-step process, that gradual desensitization to the actual phobic stimulus means that the answer for this should be C. Okay, and we don't do flooding and aversion therapy in our study design anyway, so those would have been automatically eliminated. Okay, so both of the answers for this were C. So hopefully you guys had a similar response there. Alrighty, next question. So these ones are really short. So I'm just going to put about maybe 1.5 minutes on the clock. These are related to the factors that contribute to mental illness and mental health. So essentially what we're looking at here is the biopsychosocial model as well as the constituents of that model. So the biological, psychological, and social. So I'm going to put 1 minute and 30 seconds on the clock for this one, and your time starts now. Okay, so these were pretty straightforward. So according to the biopsychosocial approach, a psychological risk factor for developing a mental illness. Now remember, whenever we talk about psychological risk factors, they're always connected to the individual. Remember, psychological factors are always related to internal factors, things that come from within the individual, whether it be emotions, how they handle stress, whether it be their individual personality. Okay, everything that's external to the person that they can't control would be an external factor. And usually our external factors are like our social factors. Okay, so the best option here would be B. So let me just project that up. Okay, B, an individual's personality, because that is directly linked to psychological factors. Now, drinking alcohol, although that is an individual's choice, it doesn't actually come under psychological factors. It's similar to this concept of substance abuse. Okay, whenever we talk about substance abuse or dependence on medications, or the ingestion of any substance that affects your brain functioning, we class that as a biological factor. So drinking alcohol in this case would be relevant to biological factor, not psychological factor. Family history of mental illness, we know that's related to genetics, so that would be biological, and friendship groups is related to social, so that's why our best answer is B. For question 5, a biological factor, this is really straightforward. It's going to be D, because D is the one that says a parent or grandparent who suffers from mental illness, which is kind of alluding to this idea of genetics or genetic predisposition. So that's why D would be the best answer then. So hopefully you guys had similar responses for those 2 questions as well. All right, so moving on to the next question. Again, this one is still looking at kind of factors and then mentally healthy characteristics. So I'm just going to give you guys, it's not too long, maybe like, 1.5 minutes again for this one. So your time starts now. Okay, so first things first, I'll just display the answer so you guys can tick it off from your end. Okay, so the first one is C, because when we're talking about the biopsychosocial model, and this was also bolded in the definition in your PowerPoint, we don't just talk about the 3 factors as being important or equally considered. We have to talk about the fact that they interact. It's not just the fact that, okay, someone is predisposed to developing depression, but this idea that, yes, their mum or dad has depression, but they also overthink. Okay, that's a psychological factor. They also just broke up with their long-time closest friend. Okay, that is a social factor. So how these other factors interact with one of the other factors to basically give a holistic kind of picture of that person's mental health. So it's important to mention in any definition or any identification of what the biopsychosocial model is about, to mention that the factors not just work in isolation, but they actually interact and they actually interrelate to one another. Okay, so that was a key word, and that's why the best option is C. Obviously, with the biopsychosocial model, we never consider that any one of the factors is more important than the other. So that's why A and B are automatically eliminated. D would be an option that most of you shouldn't have picked, because again, we know that it's about the interaction, and D is the opposite of C. So the best answer is C. For question 12, from a psychological perspective, being mentally healthy is best described as, so this is kind of like a testing your basic idea of what you think mentally healthy people are, or what characteristics they have. It can't be A, because being mentally healthy is not just the absence of a mental illness. Now, if you do health and human, you know, you would have learned that health, the definition of health is that it's a complete state of well-being and not merely the absence of disease or infirmity. So any state of health, it's not about, you know, if just because I don't have a cold, just because I don't have coronavirus, it doesn't mean that I am healthy. I could be unhealthy in other aspects. Okay, so essentially when we're talking about being mentally healthy, just because you don't have depression, that doesn't mean that you are completely mentally healthy, because you could be going through intense stress or intense anxiety, okay, which is a mental health problem. This is quite superficial. So being mentally healthy isn't described as being popular or having lots of friends. Okay, there are more elements to mental health than just that social component. Rarely experiencing negative emotions such as anger, that's not normal, because a mentally healthy person needs to show the wide range of emotions as indicated by emotional well-being. So the best option would be D, using one's cognitive, emotional and social abilities effectively. This is the option that is probably the most level-headed option, in the sense that it's not too superficial and it's not too absolute. It's the most balanced option for us. Okay, so that's the correct option there. Alrighty, so moving on to the next question. So this is a kind of small case study or scenario. So I'll probably give you guys about 1.5 minutes maybe. It's not too long. So let me just put 1.5 minutes on the clock and your time starts now. Yep, so the best answers for both of those were B and D, obviously, because breathing, retraining and exercise are biological approaches. And for D, the best option is, for question 36, the best option is D, because, yeah, we're focusing on the idea that anxiety is always some kind of worry about the future, something that hasn't occurred yet, but you're just anxious about what could happen in the future. And stress is about what's happening in the current moment. So that's why those answers are B and D respectively. All right, moving on. So the next one is a slightly longer case study. So I might give you like maybe 2.5 minutes for this one. So let me just put that time on the clock. So yeah, essentially what you just need to do is read through that case study and just answer the 2 questions that follow. And this is taken from a current study design exam from DECA 2017. So your time starts now. Yep. So yeah, the answers for 39 were D and A, because in 39 the answer is D, because obviously he's able to work towards applying for a new job. He's able to even plan a surprise birthday for his father. Okay, so he's working productively and there's no sense of dysfunction or impairment there. So that's why the best answer is D. And for 40, the best answer is A, because he is, you know, because when we're talking about internal and external factors, it's about which one is more it's not about which one is more important or which one is more influential, but rather about the interaction, and us acknowledging that internal and external factors both interact and combine to influence a person's overall mental health. So that's why the answer is A for that one. All right, so moving on. So this is taken from last year's exam. So this is a pretty recent question. Now, it's just talking about a girl named Sasha. So Sasha, a university student who works part-time in a cafe, is placed at X on the mental health continuum. So we're talking about the X, in case you can't see it, it's there. That's where Sasha is placed on the mental health continuum. Okay, and then the question is, now you have to look at where Sasha is placed on the mental health continuum, what I've circled here, and you have to decide which of the following scenarios, A, B, C, or D, best reflect Sasha's current situation based on where she is situated on the mental health continuum. So I'm going to give you guys about 1 minute to, where is my timer? Yeah, about 1 minute to go through this. So your time starts now. All right, so the best answer for this one, so before I go on blabbing, let me just display the answer first. The best answer will be C. Where's that answer? C. Okay, the best answer will be C, because the rest of them, and we'll just go through and just briefly explain why it can't be any of the other options here. So it can't be option A because Sasha, if Sasha's here, okay, if we say that mental health problem, okay, mental health problem is usually right in the middle. So if we say that mental health problem is about here, so this is the mental health problem, Sasha hasn't really reached the stage of a mental health problem. She's like in between a mental health and mental health problem. She's not really like, she's not experiencing intense stress or intense anxiety here. Maybe a very low level of stress or anxiety, but not enough to qualify her for a mental health problem. So we can't say that she's not engaged in her course and has not attended lectures, because all of these suggest some level of dysfunction, okay? These are something that I would expect if Sasha was somewhere around here on the mental health continuum, okay? If she's actually experiencing a mental illness or a mental disorder. But in this case, Sasha is nowhere near that area. So I wouldn't think that it would be option A, because option A is suggesting some level of dysfunction, which I'm not seeing according to where Sasha has been placed. Option B is Sasha deferred her course because she could not manage both work and study. This has resulted in sleeping problems for the last few weeks. Again, this is more indicative of a higher level mental health problem, kind of approaching a mental disorder, okay, because her sleep has started to get affected. She's not able to manage the stresses in her life, okay. Where Sasha is currently situated is not near the mental health problem or not past the mental health problem. So this is why we still can't say that B is the correct answer. And the reason why D is not the correct answer is because it says Sasha needs a driver's license to travel to university, but she keeps failing her license test. This is really frustrating her, but she continues to take driving lessons and books another test. So this is actually probably the best of all of those options, in the sense that if I was talking about option D, placing option D on the continuum, it would be somewhere about here. Okay, because option D doesn't suggest any kind of stress. It obviously suggests that she's frustrated at failing her test, but it doesn't suggest any major stress, and it suggests a level of productivity because she is continuing to take her driving lessons. So in order to pinpoint where C is located, C would be best located at the actual X that we were shown in the question. Okay, so it's because Sasha is coping with the workload, so she is showing some level of mental health there, but she's also showing some level of stress about her decision to change her course next year. So essentially that's why option C would be most accurately situated at the X that was shown in the question. Okay, so that's the kind of explanation or rundown. And in this question, a lot of students last year did get confused about whether it was C or D. Most accurately, if we are to look at it from all perspectives, the best answer would be C, according to where the X is placed on that continuum. Okay, and if you go through the BCAR 2019 exam, you will find that the multiple choices in that exam were very challenging compared to previous year's multiple choices. Not really challenging in the sense that they were difficult, but like there would be like 2 or 3 options that would all look like they were correct, and it would be very difficult for the students last year to have actually come to a final decision on which one was correct, especially if your content knowledge wasn't that great or wasn't that well established. Okay, so last year's multiple choice were a bit funny in that sense. All right, next question. So another scenario and just one question here. So I'm going to give you guys about 1.5 minutes, I think, to do this one, and your time starts now. All right, so this was a scenario about a girl called Marguerite. Marguerite experienced significant issues with her boss at work. She's usually a very positive, optimistic, positive kind of person, but her problems with her boss were making her very unhappy. Now that's interesting, an interesting word, which we'll need later on. She could not think of any solution. Marguerite discussed the situation with her partner, who had noticed a significant change in her attitude. Her partner suggested that she join him at the gym, blah, blah. Okay, so anyway, question 43, and you've got, this is basically testing your knowledge of internal and external factors that influence mental health. Okay, so essentially it says, which of the following identifies the internal and external factors that are interacting to put, again, keyword interacting there, interacting to put Margaret's mental health at risk. So when I look at the word very unhappy, okay, very unhappy will be an internal factor. It's relating to her emotional state. So automatically, if you picked up on this word here, and you matched it up to the options that were given under the internal box, you should have automatically chosen option C, okay? And obviously the external factor is the interactions with her boss, okay? Problems with her boss, use a different color, connecting that to interactions with her boss. So essentially, as long as you can pick up on those keywords in the scenario, this would not take you more than probably 10 to 15 seconds after you've read the scenario to answer, okay? It's a really quick one that you could have picked up on and answered very quickly. Okay, so that's the option. So the option is, where's the option? C. Okay, C is the answer there. So Internal is her emotional state and external is her interactions with her boss. Now, some students did pick option D. Okay, option D might make sense. You might say, oh, maybe Margaret's having problems because she can't resolve her conflict with her boss. But then there's nothing in the scenario that says that Margaret has low self-esteem. Okay, it says that she's an optimistic person. It says that she's positive. It says that she could not think of any solution. So she tried her best to think of a solution. It's not like she just said, oh, I'm just a dumb person. I'm not going to bother thinking of something because I have such low self-esteem. Okay, so there's nothing in the scenario that explicitly indicates that Marguerite has a low self-esteem. So the best option here will be C. Okay, we always answer these questions not by making stuff up in our head or by assuming in most instances, but by actually looking at what we've been given in the scenario that Vika have given for us. Okay, so that's why the best option is C. Okay, and it can't be a lack of solutions because there's nothing in the scenario that says genetic predisposition to anxiety, that Marguerite has a genetic history of mental health issues or anxiety. So that's why we've got to look at both of the boxes and choose the one that is correct for both options there. Alrighty, so we're almost done. We just got 2 more questions, so just hang in there. We will be done by 12, inshallah. Okay, just 2 more to go. All right, now this one obviously is relating to chapter 14. It's actually very hard to find anything. I couldn't find any questions for chapter 14, so I've just made this one up. So you guys can try this now. It is a bit long, so I will give you about 1.5 minutes again to go through it, and your time starts now. Okay, so yeah, it's just about Melissa. She's doing a uni project. She feels like she's working really well on the project. She's, you know, meeting up with her group to have coffee together. They're feeling all good. However, because of her consistent lack of sleep, she feels like she's not in a good place mentally. Like she doesn't feel that mental, I guess, stability as she usually would. But her friends and family find this strange because Melissa has never been diagnosed with a mental disorder. So how could a lack of adequate sleep specifically affect Melissa's mental health in this situation? So you had to really look at what the scenario gives you and then link it to the best option. So just kind of eliminating the option. Before I go through that, the answer here will be B. But before I explain why it's B, we'll eliminate the first few options. So Melissa could have cognitive impairments. Yes, anyone who's sleep deprived can have cognitive impairments, which could impact her progress on the project. Well, it can't be A because in the scenario, it says that she's working very productively on the project, that she's meeting all her goals. So it's not really looking like her lack of adequate sleep is affecting her project performance. It can't be option C because there's nothing in the scenario that suggests that Melissa is showing irrational behavior. You know, she's not showing any sign of delusions, or she's not showing any sign of doing something that was out of her character. So it can't be C. And it can't be D because D assumes that it's worsening an existing mental disorder that she's already experiencing. But in the last line of the case study, it says that Melissa has never been diagnosed with a mental disorder. So it can't be D based on the information in the case study. So by the process of elimination, the best option will be C. If I can get that one up. Yeah, sorry, not C, B. That's what I meant. Okay, so B is the best option here because as we learned in chapter 14 in that slide about adequate sleep, people who have adequate sleep have better control over their emotions. And we also learned about this in chapter 10 when we did sleep, that one of the effects of partial sleep deprivation is the affective effects, where your mood and your ability to control your emotions is affected, okay? And when our emotions are affected and when we're feeling glad and we're snapping at everyone around us, it is eventually going to make us feel like we're not in a good place mentally, similar to Melissa's situation. Okay, so that's why the best option was B for this question. All right, last question for today. This is related to the forms of social support, aka ATI. Remember the ATI forms of social support we went through? That was the last topic of chapter 14. And I'm going to give you, again, 1.5 minutes to do this question, and your time starts now. Recording, sorry. She's trying to get some, you know, tips and pointers from Fatima and some advice about how to best look after her twin. So that's what Khadija is trying to achieve. And the reason why it's option C, information support, is because by turning to Fatima for social support, she's basically trying to get information about how to best look after her twins. So that's essentially what we were trying to, why the answer was C and why the answer was not any of the other options. Okay, so it's a pretty straightforward question. Again, as long as you know what each of these types of social support are about, you should have been able to answer this question quite quickly. So the best answer here will be C, information support. Okay, remember, oh, and one more thing, sorry. Information support is always when there's someone else who has that information and you can't get access to that information. That's when we turn to that person for that informational support there. Okay, so obviously Khadija didn't have that information herself. This is the first time she's had twins. She couldn't find that information from Google, from a proper source. So she's actually just turning to Fatima for that information support. Alrighty, so that is the end for today. So what you need to do is revise for your SAC, go through and properly revise the outcome 2 notes. They're on the school box under the files. Also under the files, you will find chapter 11, 13, and 14 PowerPoints, which are all already adjusted for the 2020 study design. I have uploaded a practice test for chapter 11 on the school box. It should be on your social stream. It's only for chapter 11, and that is the test that we are going to be going through the answers for tomorrow afternoon in period 6. Tomorrow afternoon, after I finish the lesson, after we finish our online lesson, I'll also upload another practice SAC, and that practice SAC is going to cover all of chapter 11, 13, and 14. That's more like a complete practice SAC for you to actually try out during the holidays. And in the holiday classes, probably in the second holiday class next Thursday, we will discuss the solutions to that whole practice SAC, okay? So tomorrow afternoon, you need to make sure you do that chapter 11 practice test that's already on social stream, because we'll be discussing answers for that. Now, email me if you have any questions. And remember, our unit for outcome 2 SAC is going to be on Friday, the 9th of October, which is term 4 week 1. So make sure you are up to date and ready for that. Now, regardless of whether we're back at school by then or regardless of whether we're learning from home, either way, the SAC will be run on Education Perfect. So it will still continue to run on that date unless I tell you otherwise. Okay, so that is when your SAC is going to be. So yeah, that's about it for today. So I'll just stop the recording here.